Welcome to the first episode of a new YouTube series, Legends Crusade. This series will cover my ongoing Last Aslanti unfair playthrough in Pathfinder, Wrath of the Righteous as a Kitsune Trickster Legend. I'll primarily focus on challenging encounters and bosses, interspersed with discussions on my game plan and builds. We start our journey in the Shield Maze. Before going into the fights themselves, I'll spend the first few episodes discussing the party composition. I have a somewhat standardized setup I use for the prologue, which includes the following: an animal companion tank, a rowdy rogue for damage, protective luck, and some good buff spells. In this episode, we'll discuss early game utility of animal companions, mainly for tanking. Animal companions have many uses, like being mounts, tanks, triggering outflank, and tripping. Here we're focusing on one's role as an early game tank. Later, it can also be used as a mount or for tripping. On this slide, we compare early game armor class values and other info. For the prologue, we're mainly looking at level 3. Leopard is the best early game tank, with a big spike after level 4. The weakness of low flat-footed armor class can be partly mitigated by selecting the blind fight feat. Boar, mastodon, and dog are good if you want to mount the animal companion later. The former is more tanky, the latter better for tripping, and the mastodon falls in the middle. Here's an overview of animal companions in the more aggressive role as a tripper. In the early game, enemies are unlikely to get tripped as your main tank will fight defensively. However, you can use a second companion or build into tripping later on. Initially, the leopard is once again best, but it gets surpassed later. Agile maneuvers seems good, but has negative synergy with size buffs like animal growth, and it also costs a feat. Keep in mind that what we see here are unbuffed stats. Being single ability dependent becomes comparatively worse with buffs as they cover multiple abilities. Let's look at feat selection for a leopard. There are a couple of ways to approach it. If you're planning to use the animal long-term, then weapon finesse scales well. It's hard to fit in later as we'll want to take other feats. However, if you're only using it as a tank for the prologue, you're probably better off just taking a tank feat. You won't be hitting much fighting defensively without the crane line, and your damage pre-level 4 is pathetic. To get an animal companion, you must first choose a class that offers it. While there are other classes that provide animal companions, they usually do so at a later level or with a smaller selection. Our choice depends on what we lack. Need buffs? Consider Huntmaster or Sylvan Sorcerer. Need damage for a rowdy rogue? Perhaps we splash Hunter on her. If everything's covered and you want a full BAV-mounted melee later, then Cavalier is a good choice. Finally, here are the animal companions I've chosen for my run. The leopard will only be used in the prologue. The mastodon I plan to use again later down the line. In the next episode, I'll cover buffs, dealing damage, and introduce the human team. This will include the owners of these two. Once we've done that, it will finally be time for some combat.